Okay, so we're going to get started. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Today's topic is latest student loan updates. We have with us Nancy Neerman from the Consumer Service. I'm getting it mixed up now. Community Services Society.
Sorry, it's the Education Debt Consumer Assistance Program, or EDCAP, which is a program of the Community Service Society. Um,
Say that 3 times.
Yeah, I know I'm not. It's too cold. Which is a nonprofit. So
yes. All right, so Nancy's going to be giving our latest student loan updates. We do, as a part of Legal Services of Long Island, have a unit education debt consumer assistance program, which assists folks on Long Island with student loans or student debt. And we have with us today Courtney Murphy, who's a staff attorney. So Courtney, if you want to say hello to everybody, anybody can give a call.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to put my email in the chat so that you have it.
Thanks, Courtney. So if you're unfamiliar with Legal Services of Long Island, and Nancy, you can go forward. Thank you. First, we have the agenda. So this is what we're going to be discussing today. And if you're unfamiliar with Legal Services of Long Island, we are Long Island's largest civil legal services provider for free civil legal services. We handle over 6,000 legal cases every year, which includes direct representation, phone consultations, brief service or referrals to other agencies. We have offices in Hempstead, Islandia, and Riverhead, and our case handling staff includes attorneys, paralegals, and social workers. We do have partnerships with community agencies, whether it be Community Service Society or Empire Justice or Brighter Tomorrows. So we have lots of different partnerships. Next slide. These are the offices that we have in Hempstead, Islandia, and Riverhead. We have our website, legalservicesli.org. All of those phone numbers, you can direct clients to call if they are looking for legal services, so that way they can be screened. Hempstead is for Nassau County residents, and Islandia and Riverhead are for Suffolk County. Next slide. And we have about 20 different units all throughout Long Island, whether it be family law related, such as our domestic violence project in Suffolk County, or disability and health related projects, such as our education and disability rights project, or housing. We do eviction prevention all throughout Long Island, our foreclosure defense project, and then other different areas of law, our units that are specific to areas of law or different populations, such as our Veterans Rights Project or our Consumer Debt Project. We do have a new citizenship and naturalization project, which is just getting off the ground as well, which helps folks with green cards become naturalized. Next slide. And we have our Legal Support Center for Advocates, which many of you may already be familiar with. This is a unit that specifically helps advocates, whether it be social workers, church volunteers, elected officials, could be other attorneys, anyone who's assisting a client and has a question on whether or not it's a service that we would provide to their client, or if you just have a question, you have, the landlord turned off your client's heat, you have a question about that, where do you go? Please give us a call. This direct phone line is only for advocates. It's not for clients because we're not case handlers. Sometimes clients will call, and unfortunately that's the long way to go. So if you do have a client, you'd like to make a referral, please send them to our regular phone number. These extensions are for advocates only. We also publish newsletters. I send out legal lessons every month. So lots of services for our advocates. So before we go into the next slide, just have a few polls for you all to, so let me just grab that. So first, we're just going to launch the question, what type of advocate are you? So if you could just briefly take a moment to answer that question, I'd really appreciate it. Okay, just another few seconds. Okay, we'll end the poll and share the results. So it looks like we have a lot of attorneys with us today, a bunch of nonprofit employees, some church volunteers, social workers. So thanks so much for joining us today. Appreciate you being here. Our next question is going to be, have you ever called the Legal Support Center for Advocates? So if you could just take a moment to answer that, I'd really appreciate it. Okay, another few seconds. Okay, I'll end the poll. All right, so we have a few of you who are familiar with the Legal Support Center for Advocates. Let me just share these results. And most of you are not familiar with the Legal Support Center for Advocates. So welcome, and I hope that you're able to utilize our service in the future. We have folks who've been calling us for probably several decades at this point. So we are a great resource for you all. So please give us a call. And then the last question that we have today, just to start us off in the right foot, if you have student loans, so if you could just answer that question, and don't worry, it's anonymous. I know I have student loans, so hopefully they'll be gone soon through the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. That is the goal. Okay, another few seconds. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So it looks like a majority of you have student loans for yourself. Some of you have taken it out for your children. You also assist clients with student loans, and some are just here to learn more. So hopefully we can provide you with the information you need today. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Nancy.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sharon, and thank you and welcome everybody. I'm just gonna see if I can turn my video off while I do this. So today we're going to be talking about some of the latest updates on student loans, and I kind of want to, before we get into the thick of it, I just want to say and issue a little disclaimer that we obviously have just had a change in administrations. The new administration has some very different ideas about student loans than the previous administration. We do anticipate some significant changes going forward, the timing of which and exactly how many will be implemented. We don't know yet, so stay tuned. If we have to come back here in a month or two and update you again, we will arrange to do that. So in terms of what we're going to be discussing today, we're going to go into the strategies, the current strategies for tackling student debt, and the majority of our conversations are going to revolve around federal student debt. We're going to talk a little bit about the repayment plans and some of the forgiveness programs that are available to you all, and we'll update you throughout the presentation about the latest information in each of these categories. So in terms of strategies for tackling debt, one of the things that clients tend to come to us with when they come to us is they generally have an immediate need that needs to be resolved. So they either need to find a cheaper repayment plan, or maybe they're in default or about to go into default. And of course, it's extremely important to resolve all those issues. But at the end of the day, one of the things that we strive to do in our services is leave you with a longer term strategy for actually getting rid of your debt, because ultimately that's the goal for everybody, is to just eliminate your debt. And what we've noticed, we've been around for 5 years or so, and our program was established in 2019. And in the thousands of clients that we've seen, we've decided that most people are going to fall into one of 3 buckets in terms of strategies for tackling debt. So the first bucket, which is the one that one would normally think about when they take on debt, is you pay the debt in full. And if your strategy is to pay your debt off in full, you want to do that as quickly as possible. So this strategy is really going to be best for borrowers who have high incomes compared to their debt balances. They may have the ability to make a payment that's more than the required payment on a monthly basis, or even make lump sum payments. Because if your strategy is to pay your debt off in full, the faster you pay it off, the more you're going to save in interest overall. Sometimes means making higher payments, but the more aggressively you pay on a monthly basis or in lump sums, the faster you pay it off and the more you save on interest over the life of the loan. The middle category is probably where most of our clients lie, which is pay the minimum required and pursue forgiveness. So there are strategies, very viable strategies within the federal student loan system that don't require that you pay off your entire debt. And as Sharon mentioned earlier in her introduction, one of those would be obviously the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. And there are other forgiveness programs that one can pursue, at least for now, that allow you to basically make a minimum payment, usually in an income-driven repayment plan, until such time as your debt is forgiven. So this is going to be best suited to people with high loan balances, low to moderate incomes. If you're pursuing PSLF or IDR forgiveness, you're going to need to be in an income-driven repayment plan. And then if that's your strategy, what you really should not think about making extra payments on your loans. You just want to make those minimum payments until such time as the debt is forgiven and you've satisfied all of the requirements of whatever forgiveness program you're pursuing. And then the last strategy is to make the minimum required until death do you part. Now, as morose as this sounds, we put it there for a reason. And the reason is that that federal student loans, if the primary borrower dies, the loan does not pass on to their beneficiary. So basically, the loan is discharged in death. And that is typically something that does not happen with most consumer debt. With most consumer debt, if you pass away, the obligation of the debt then passes to the estate of the decedent. And so your loved ones are going to have to tackle that. It may not go to them directly, but they will be impacted by that in some way. That's not what happens in the federal system. The entire debt is discharged. So this strategy is really going to be for older borrowers. If you're a parent borrower, you may be approaching retirement, or you're in retirement, or you maybe took out loans late in life for yourself. If you're in your 50s or 60s and it's evident that you're going to have to pay the loan for another 20 or 30 years, that could be the rest of your life. So you just find the cheapest available plan and make that payment, just knowing that when you do pass, the burden does not pass on to your beneficiaries. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the legal challenges, some of the immediate legal challenges largely impacting the SAVE plan. But just as a little bit of a context, two attorneys general from states from Kansas and Missouri, back in April of last year, filed lawsuits challenging the Biden administration's new SAVE plan and some related regulations to the SAVE plan. In July of last year, a federal appeals court blocked the Department of Education from enrolling any borrowers in the SAVE plan or offering forgiveness through that plan until these legal issues are resolved. Also, borrowers who are in the plan are not allowed to be billed at the price of at the calculation in the SAVE plan. So what happened was the Department of Education placed all SAVE borrowers, anybody that was in the SAVE plan, as of, I believe, July 18th of 2024, was placed in a non-interest-bearing forbearance that does not count towards forgiveness programs. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how that impacts those of you trying to pursue PSLF a little bit later. People can enroll for the SAVE plan now, but those applications are not going to be processed until the legal issues are resolved. IDR and consolidation applications, and very often people will do an IDR application at the end of a consolidation application, are now available online. For a while, they were blocked. They were not available online. We do believe for a while, the Department of Education had stopped processing any income-driven repayment plan applications. It's only recently that we do think that they have started to process this kind of backlog of different applications that have piled up over the last several months. But expect delays if you have submitted an IDR application for a plan other than SAVE. You should still expect delays in terms of getting those processed. Now, you should be in a forbearance while it's being processed. There are different types of forbearances out there. I'm not going to go into the details of this right now. But if you're not in a forbearance while your IDR plan is being processed, reach out to to Long Island, to Legal Services of Long Island for some expert advice on what you need to do to get yourself in a forbearance, so you're not forced to make payments maybe in a traditional plan that you can't afford. The current environment is really, really difficult. Be the litigation, and then of course the change in administration has just introduced a lot of uncertainty into the entire system. One of the things that we want to kind of emphasize for everybody out there is that you need to download and save important documents from your servicer accounts and from your FSA accounts, just to make sure that this information remains accurate and it's not lost. Things can happen when a new administration comes in, not necessarily because it's they're meaning to lose your information, but if there's a transition in the systems at all, things can get lost. So it's really important right now to make sure that you're downloading things like loan details, any kind of important notifications from your servicer inboxes. You want to check those on a regular basis. If you're pursuing PSLF, the PSLF tracker is now on your federal student aid account. You can download or screenshot that information to make sure you have it. And we're going to talk a little bit later about the new IDR forgiveness tracker as well. Err on the side of caution if you're not sure about what to do, particularly when it comes to important considerations like consolidation. Reach out for help before you go ahead and do that. I will say, in terms of filing for income-driven repayment plans or any repayment plans, generally those can be changed. If you apply for something, you realize it's a mistake, you can change those. But if you're doing a consolidation, you can't undo it after a certain period of time. So you want to make sure that you're doing it correctly. And then when you get the deck, and I presumably this deck is going to be sent out after the presentation, we've got some links to some important websites that will allow you to kind of keep up on the SAVE litigation, the outcome of the SAVE litigation, and you can also subscribe to the EdCap newsletter. We don't publish this frequently, but when we do, it's usually because there's important information to convey. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about choosing the right repayment plan, because no conversation about student loans really occurs without ultimately deciding on what repayment plan you're going to use, because that's your vehicle ultimately to eliminate your debt. In the federal system, there's two basic ways to make a payment on a federal student loan. Either you have these traditional plans where the payment is based on the size of the debt, the interest rate, and a predetermined payback period. That's like paying back a regular consumer loan, or like a mortgage or an auto loan. The fixed version of those plans, you just make one monthly payment over the life of the loan, after which you've paid off the entire debt, including all the interest. The alternative to that is income-driven repayment plans, or IDR plans. And when I say IDR, that's an umbrella term for 4 different repayment plans right now, and potentially a 5th that could resurface. The IDR plans most of them are strictly based on your adjusted gross income, your tax filing status, and your family size. So really has nothing to do with the size of the loan or the interest rate. And very often that's going to be a more affordable option than the traditional plans. So in terms of the pros and the cons, very briefly, for traditional plans, if you can afford them, the payments are more predictable. They may offer shorter periods of repayment, not always, but they can. And then the administration of the plan is a lot easier because you don't have to verify your income, which is something that you have to do on an annual basis with the IDR plans. Traditional plans, again, are going to be better suited for people with high income relative to their debt. The downside to the traditional plans is sometimes they're unaffordable. You just can't afford them. There's limited flexibility in your ability to adjust payments in those plans, and they don't offer forgiveness if you remain in the plans throughout the life of the loan. And most of the plans don't offer forgiveness at all. The plan names that you might recognize as a traditional plan would be standard, extended, graduated. You might even see on your servicer accounts level. If you see the level plan, that's basically a fixed version of a traditional plan. Income-driven repayment plans, the pros, of course, like I said earlier, they may offer a more affordable option to the traditional plans. Loan forgiveness in these plans could be anywhere from 10 to 25 years of making payments. Now, big caveat here, loan forgiveness tied to 3 out of the 4 plans. So all the plans except for income-based repayment, or IBR, is currently potentially at risk in this SAVE litigation. So right now, the Department of Education is not offering forgiveness in any of the income-driven repayment plans except for IBR. We'll have to await the outcome of the litigation to see whether the other plans will continue to offer forgiveness. That has nothing to do with PSLF, by the way. Public Service Loan Forgiveness is a different program. It's not being litigated. You can still be in any of those plans and get credit for PSLF. But this, what's called income-driven repayment forgiveness, which is something that you get just for being enrolled in an IDR plan, generally for 20 to 25 years. The new SAVE plan offered a shorter path to forgiveness. That's all tied up in litigation right now. IDR plans are required for certain forgiveness programs like PSLF and IDR forgiveness. You can adjust your payments. You are required to recertify your income on an annual basis, but if your income drops in between recertification dates, you can have the plan recalculated and your payment would be adjusted. So again, these plans are going to be best suited for people with high income, high loan balances, low to moderate incomes who are pursuing certain forgiveness programs. The downside is that the recertification process is a bit of an administrative headache, and for some people, it becomes a burden that can be difficult to keep up with, but it is something that you have to do. Interest in all of these plans, with the exception of SAVE, will accumulate if your monthly payment doesn't cover the interest charge for that month. And that's why people make payments on these loans and yet continue to see their balances increase and increase over time. But if you're pursuing forgiveness programs at the end of that time period, the balances are going to be forgiven. And then it may take you longer to get rid of your debt. The 4 plans right now that are part of the IDR umbrella would be the SAVE plan, which is currently on hold because of litigation. Then you have pay-as-you-earn, income-based repayment, which is often confused with income-driven repayment, and then income contingent repayment, which is the oldest plan. And then I'm not going to go into all the details in a nutshell, but if we do have this for you. It gives you a little bit of an overview about the different plans, how the payments are calculated, what some of the requirements are, which ones are available, and which ones are on hold. So right now, of the 4 plans that are available, the SAVE plan is the only one that's on hold. You can apply for that plan, but you will not be enrolled. And frankly, I'm going to speak very bluntly here. We do not think that the SAVE plan is going to survive the litigation. So we'll talk a little bit more about maybe, at what point you might want to consider switching to a different plan if you're enrolled in SAVE. The IBR plan, the 2 different versions of IBR, the pay-as-you-earn plan and the ICR plan are all currently available. And like I said, there's some different qualifications and different requirements in all the different plans. The other plan that I want to mention is called Revised Pay-as-you-earn, or REPAYE. Some of you may remember that this was the predecessor to the SAVE plan. If you were enrolled in RepayE last year, in 2023, when they first rolled out the SAVE plan in the fall of 2023, you were automatically transitioned from RepayE into SAVE. So RepayE is not available right now. We don't really know what's going to happen as a result of litigation. If they strike down SAVE, they could bring back the old revised pay-as-you-earn plan. So I've just given you some of the basic eligibility requirements right here, so you're somewhat familiar with it if it does come back, but it's not available right now. In terms of the application processing, like I've been saying, you can enroll in the SAVE plan, you can submit those applications, but they're not going to be processed until the court case is resolved. And of course, if SAVE is not available at that point, you would have to choose a different plan. We do believe that processing for all of these other repayment plans, whether you're enrolling in them for the first time or doing a recertification or a recalculation, we think that it's started now. And if it hasn't started in earnest, it should be starting very soon. But once again, it's going to take a while to process everything. Just a reminder that the on-ramp, so that was the grace period that was implemented when borrowers first went back into repayment in October of 2023. It was a year-long grace period that technically ended at the end of September of 2024, but they really kind of extended it till October of 2024. It allowed you to miss payments and not have any major financial repercussions. So there were no late fees incurred, payments weren't reported to the credit agencies, and you were at no risk of default if you didn't make a payment throughout that time period. But that's over now. That ended, like I said, technically, in reality, practically speaking, it ended on October 31st. So any missed payments from November of last year, you're going to start to see some of these issues. And credit reporting happens after 3 months of missed payments. So basically, if you have not sorted out a payment plan for yourself, you have till the end of January. If you haven't been making payments since November, you have till the end of January to try to enroll in a repayment plan before those late payments or those delinquencies get reported to the credit agencies. And remember, after 270 days or about 9 months of non-payment, you're going to be at risk of default. So not an immediate risk, but that's something to think about. So if you haven't figured out your repayment situation right now, you want to call LSLI, get some help, make sure that you sort something out in the next few weeks. Okay, Vivian, I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions that need to be answered.
Yes, there are a number of questions that I answered briefly in chat, but I think some of them might warrant further discussion. One question was about how someone identifies whether they have something that would be considered a high balance compared to their income. I gave a suggestion to use the calculators on the EdCap and FSA websites, but you may want to speak more to that.
Yeah, so basically, the best way to figure that out, and we have one of our calculators on the EdCap website is called the Student Loan Payoff Calculator. So that's for somebody that might be thinking about just paying off their loans in full, and that would generally be through like a standard plan. And standard plans, depending on your loan balance, can range anywhere from 10 years to 30 years. If you plug your debt information into that calculator, and figure out what your payment might be if you wanted to pay the loan off in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. And if you can't afford that payment, you have a high loan balance, and you might have to consider an IDR plan.
There were a couple of questions about suggestions or approaches for parent borrowers. And I encourage people who have parent loans to work with a counselor. I know you've got a little bit of information about Parent Plus loans later in the presentation, but you may want to comment on that a little now as well.
Yeah, so those of you with Parent Plus loans are probably aware of the fact that there are fewer repayment options for Parent Plus loans than there are for other for student borrowers and in the federal system. So Parent Plus loans, a direct Parent Plus loan is not eligible for any of the income-driven repayment plans. They're only going to be eligible for one of the one or two of the standard plan, either the 10-year standard plan or the 25-year standard plan if you have more than $30,000 in debt. The only way to gain access to an IDR plan is to consolidate your loans, which may also then give you access to different repayment terms in the standard plans. But you will only get access to the income contingent repayment plan, or ICR, which is the oldest repayment plan out there and it can be kind of expensive. It can be very expensive in a lot of instances. The one place where it tends to work actually really fairly well is if your loan balance is high compared, if your income is high compared to your loan balance. So like if you, let's say you had $20,000 or $50,000 in debt, but your income is $150,000, the ICR plan might actually work out for you. If it's the other way around, where your income is $50,000 and you have $150,000 in debt, ICR is going to be very expensive. There are some strategies, one in particular, it's called the loophole, that I'm not going to go into right now because it's very complicated. It is a workaround that could potentially give you access to a cheaper repayment plan. But if you haven't started it, you need to literally start it in the next few weeks, because there's a time frame to get this done. There's a lot of uncertainty around this strategy as to whether it's going to work. It's also tied up in the SAVE regulations, and if that gets struck down, it's a little bit of question mark about how this loophole will operate. But you should definitely reach out to LSLI for some additional information and additional counseling on how to go about managing a Parent Plus loan. Parent Plus borrowers are eligible for public service loan forgiveness. It has to be the parent that meets the requirements, meets the employment requirements, but you are eligible if you're still working. But it can be a challenge to achieve that because you generally have to at some point be in an income-driven repayment plan, and often you're limited to ICR, which can be expensive. So you want to discuss all the different options. And also one thing that I do want to caution people about, if you've got Parent Plus loans and loans for yourself that you might have taken out as a student, not for your kids, but for yourself, before you consolidate, reach out for counseling. If you consolidate, any consolidation loan that contains any Parent Plus loans is only limited to the ICR plan. So you want to be very, very careful about how you consolidate. If you've got a Parent Plus loan, don't do it without seeking advice.
There actually was one question about the loophole and getting into SAVE now as a Parent Plus borrower. But I think you covered that one.
Well, let me just say, remember, the loophole, I would not recommend, frankly, going through the loophole and applying for SAVE at this point, but you might, because we really just don't think it's gonna, I mean, you can try that, but we just really don't think that the SAVE plan is gonna happen. But the loophole should work for the other repayment plans as well. Now, they may not be as cheap as SAVE, but they may be less expensive than ICR. So if you're eligible for PayE or IBR, you can explore those through the loophole as well.
If someone is currently in SAVE, should they be thinking about switching to another plan at this point, given the status of the litigation?
So I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. So let's maybe address that a little bit later on.
And then there was a question about determining if you would be eligible for an IDR plan based on the balance of your loan.
So there's no balance cutoff in these plans. In two of the plans, in PayE and income-based repayment, there's what they call there is an income test. It's not it's not based on a specific income or a specific balance. It's based on basically it's based on the balance in your income in comparison to the balance. And the way it works is, if you're not enrolled in those plans and the calculation under the IDR plan exceeds what you would be paying in the standard 10-year fixed version of that plan, you would not be eligible for those repayment plans. So that's why I'm saying that if your income is high in comparison to your loan balance, the income test may prevent you from enrolling in those plans. Now, if you're already enrolled in those plans in Payee or IBR, and you hit that threshold when you recertify, you will not be kicked out of the plan. That 10-year standard fixed payment will become a cap for your payment for the next year. It's a little bit complicated. You probably want to reach out for a little bit of help with this. But there is no specific balance or specific income that prevents you from getting into a plan. Plans like SAVE or ICR or the old revised pay as you earn had no income test. So basically they're open to anybody that has direct loans, except for direct Parent Plus loans.
There's a question about employer loan forgiveness options. For those, most of what we're talking about is federal student loan and federal student loan payment options. If you have something that's offered by your individual employer, I would suggest reaching out to your human resources department to make sure that you understand how that employer-sponsored loan forgiveness or loan payoff operates. And if you're not sure that you understand the answers that you're receiving, then you can reach out to us or to another EdCap counselor to help understand how the federal student loan repayment options interact with the support that your employer offers. Next, there is a question about how to identify if you have a Parent Plus loan. If you log on to the studentaid.gov website, it should identify the type of loan, but basically a Parent Plus loan is a federal loan that a parent took out to pay for their child's education.
For undergraduate school only. So
what can I do if I can't afford my IDR plan?
So yeah, this is obviously the question that's going to be facing a number of people now. If it looks like the SAVE program is not going to work. There are some strategies. It depends on why you're not able to afford it. Is it something that's temporary? Is this something that you think is going to be sort of a more permanent type of situation? There are ways to reduce your payments in an income-driven repayment plan by sort of manipulating how much money you put towards your retirement, or it's generally the retirement is kind of the big one, because the payment is generally based on something called adjusted gross income. The main difference between gross income and adjusted gross income is money that you apply pre-tax, comes out of your pre-tax towards things like retirement or medical plans or flexible spending accounts, transportation even, reduce your gross income and produce this thing called AGI. So if you can afford to put more money towards retirement, you might be able to reduce your AGI, which would then in turn reduce your student loan payment. If you're married and filing your taxes jointly, you might want to consider filing your taxes separately. For anybody that's interested, EdCap is doing a webinar tomorrow, I believe at noon, specifically for married borrowers to address the whole tax filing status issue. You can go to our website at EdCap New York, edcapny.org and register for that. So that's, but if you're just you're single and you're really kind of up against it, there are these things called alternative repayment plans. Some of them are temporary in nature. They might not all suit you, but one can explore that. We can also explore making uses of things like forbearances or maybe, economic hardship deferments. All of these things are something, if you're in that situation, that you want to reach out to your counselor and get some expert advice on that.
I think that was it for the moment.
Okay, well, great. Those were great questions, and I'm going to continue, and hopefully there'll be more at the end of this next section. So we are going to talk a little bit more in depth about some of the forgiveness programs, and I'll tell you my views on where we stand with some of these forgiveness programs. So we've kind of addressed some of these so far. The income-driven repayment forgiveness program, we talked about that. That's where you would get forgiveness in anywhere from, for the most part, 20 to 25 years, just strictly by being enrolled in one of those IDR plans. And there's no employment requirement for this program. This is kind of the default forgiveness program for people who have high loan balances and low to moderate incomes and can't afford the traditional plans. You have to be enrolled in an IDR plan. The outcome, whether or not will be able to continue to get forgiveness in 3 of the 4 plans, it depends on the outcome of the SAVE litigation. I will mention, though, if you're in one of those plans, if you're in Payee or you're in SAVE and or ICR, and you've accumulated a bunch of credit towards IDR forgiveness, you won't lose it if you have to transfer to the IBR plan to get your forgiveness. So you can at least for now, that's not how it's going to work. The other thing I'll say about IDR forgiveness is forgiven balances in this program may be taxable after this year. So starting in January of 2026, if you have balances that are forgiven through IDRF, you might wind up getting a tax bill on those forgiven balances. Public service loan forgiveness, however, the forgiven balances in that program are not taxable. It forgives your balances, your remaining balances after making 10 years of qualifying payments. There's a bunch of requirements for this. You have to have direct loans. You have to generally be in an income-driven repayment plan. And then, of course, you have to meet the employment requirements by working full-time, which is now considered an average of 30 hours per week for a nonprofit or a government employer. And one other key thing with public service loan forgiveness is at the time when you think you've got 120 qualifying payments, at the time you're applying and requesting forgiveness, you must be meeting the employment requirements. So if you're right there, and if you're at 120 or you're going to be at 120 and you're going to be submitting that last form, don't quit your job until you submit the form, until you actually submit the form. That's one of the rules of the plan. Borrower defense to repayment, or BDR, discharges balances for people who were defrauded by their colleges or universities. The school would have to be guilty of some kind of misconduct, misrepresenting certain facts, or promising services that they don't provide. It's not simply I don't like my curriculum, or I didn't like my teacher, or I got harassed or assaulted on campus. That's not a BDR defense. BDR and closed school discharge, which is a program that discharges debt if your school closes while you're enrolled in a program or shortly after you withdraw, are both being challenged in the courts right now. BDR, a certain aspect of BDR is going to be decided in the Supreme Court over the coming months. The Biden administration, and by the way, what's being challenged for the BDR plan is the Biden administration's newest version of the plan. There are older versions of the plan. The Biden administration was not allowed to process claims under the new version because that's being litigated. The older versions of the plan are still out there and technically available. The Biden administration was processing applications under the older versions of BDR. It remains to be seen whether the Trump administration will do that, because during his first term, they didn't process anything. They didn't process any of the BDR applications. So we'll see. BDR it's a long process. I wouldn't necessarily discourage people from filing a claim if you think you have one, because it's good to have that on record. But it can take years to get a decision, and I would not necessarily recommend being in a forbearance for 3 years or 4 years or however long while you're waiting for the decision, if you can pursue other forgiveness options at the same time while you're waiting. Total and permanent disability discharge is kind of what it sounds like. It's for people who have a mental or physical ability that prevents them from earning a livable wage. TPD is an operational, and I don't remember whether I put, yeah, I did, okay. TPD is a program that is in statute, I believe, and as far as we know, this is not going away anytime soon, but there are some changes with the way these applications are going to be processed, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So some of the other programs, I'm not going to go through them all. The top one is actually a New York State program that's administered by HESC in New York State, and it really only applies to people with an undergraduate degree if you graduated within the last 2 years. Teacher loan forgiveness, the only thing I want to say about teacher loan forgiveness is that anybody that's eligible for teacher loan forgiveness is generally going to be eligible for PSLF as well. Teacher loan forgiveness forgives up to $17,500 in federal loans for teachers who meet the criteria of the program. To get the $17,500, you need to be teaching in math, science, or special education. Whereas public service loan forgiveness does not require that you have a specific profession. It just requires that your employer qualify and that you be a full-time employee or a 30-hour per week employee of that employer. Teacher loan forgiveness does require that you be an actual teacher and that you teach for 5 consecutive academic years. If you're not teaching in one of those areas that I mentioned before, the maximum that you would get was $5,000. Now, the issue with teacher loan forgiveness is you can pursue both teacher loan forgiveness and PSLF at the same time. Or you can pursue both programs, but you can't pursue them both at the same time. So what would have to happen is you would have to pursue your teacher loan forgiveness first for 5 years, get your forgiveness through that, and then start your 10 years of PSLF, meaning that it would take you 15 years to get rid of all your debt. So the key takeaway from this is if your loan balance is high, if you've got $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $100,000 in loans, and you're a teacher, don't bother with teacher loan forgiveness. You're only going to get a small portion of that forgiven after 5 years. You're going to have to continue then to pay for another additional 10 years to get your entire balance forgiven, where you can go through PSLF and get the whole thing forgiven because there's no limit on how much you can get forgiven in 10 years. If you've got a smaller balance, though, if you've got less than $17,500 and you're eligible for the whole thing, or even just 20 or 25,000, you might consider teacher loan forgiveness, which would forgive all or most of your debt in 5 years. And then I'll let you read up on the others at your own leisure. TPD, I mentioned that they're going through a change in processing procedures right now. So we expect delays. As a matter of fact, they stopped processing TPD applications back in December. They just basically said through the spring. They haven't given a specific date. Similar to what happened with PSLF last year, the management of the TPD program, which had been done by Nelnet, a specific servicer, is now being transferred directly to the Department of Education. And so everything will be done through the Department of Education website going forward. Applications will be sent to them. There does seem to be a way an uplink to submit those forms through your federal student aid account right now. I haven't actually done it myself just yet, but the link is there. It's in the forms library for anybody that might want to look into that. The other way, and this is about a week or two old, as of a couple of weeks ago, you could still email your applications to Nelnet using the disability information email. But frankly, at this point, we recommend calling the Nelnet or calling Federal Student Aid first to make sure that they're still accepting the applications that way. While people are waiting for this processing delay, borrowers, once they file the applications, should be placed in a forbearance during the transition period. But once again, expect processing delays. And for any advocates that are helping clients with TPD, you want to make sure you stay on top of these applications. And we'll have to monitor this situation over the coming months. Okay, now, guidance for people who are pursuing public service loan forgiveness. And I think this kind of is probably going back to the question earlier about whether somebody should switch out of the SAVE program. So just to reaffirm, the legal challenges are currently not targeting the public service loan forgiveness program, but they do obviously affect all the IDR plans, which borrowers need to get their credit to receive qualifying payments towards PSLF. So for people who are in the SAVE forbearance, particularly those who are close to 120 qualifying payments, you have a few options. You can consider using the PSLF buyback. The buyback program allows you to pay for months that you were in non-qualifying forbearances or deferments in the past, and get forgiveness that way. Now, in order to use the buyback, you must have 120 months of qualifying employment on record. So that means that you need to update your PSLF certification forms to get that 120 qualifying months on record. Once you have those months on record, you can do the buyback as long as the number of months that you're planning to buy back will get you to 120 qualifying payments. And you can't buy back months prior to a consolidation. So if you're not close to 120 qualifying months of payment right now and you're pursuing PSLF, this is not an option for you, but it could be for people who are actually quite close. Who basically, if they filed a PSLF certification form right now, would be at 120 qualifying months of employment. The other thing that you can do is consider switching to a different repayment plan, one of the repayment plans that we discussed earlier. So you can get PSLF through all the income-driven repayment plans. Now, it may take you a while to get the application processed. In theory, what's supposed to happen is that when you apply for a new plan, you are placed in a processing forbearance, which is different than the SAVE forbearance that you are currently in. A processing forbearance is an interest-bearing forbearance, but will offer credit towards forgiveness for up to 2 months. The only thing I'm going to issue as a caveat right here is that we've heard some of the servicers saying that they're not applying those processing forbearances for borrowers who are already in the SAVE forbearance. But regardless, if you're getting close to 120 qualifying payments, and obviously you're not earning any credit by just sitting in the SAVE forbearance, with the likelihood of the SAVE forbearance, with the SAVE plan not, materializing, you may want to consider switching plans right now. The other thing that can happen if the SAVE litigation doesn't go through is that, or if the SAVE plan doesn't go through, is that they revert everybody back to the old revised pay-as-you-earn plan. But we just don't know the timing or whether that would in effect be what would happen. So switching a plan may be something you want to consider right now. And then finally, payments in the standard 10-year fixed repayment plan actually do count towards public service loan forgiveness. Now, if you made all your payments in the standard 10-year fixed repayment plan, you wouldn't get forgiveness because you would pay the entire thing off. But if you're a few payments away from PSLF and you qualify for the standard 10-year fixed plan and you can afford the payment in that plan, that would be one way of earning credit towards PSLF. I will caution you though, if you have consolidation loans, most consolidation loans are not going to be eligible for that standard 10-year fixed repayment plan. But if your loans are not consolidated and they're direct loans, you might consider. For anybody that's pursuing PSLF and any of the other income-driven repayment plans, just continue making those plans. Recertify your plan when required. Recertification dates, if you were required to recertify in November, December, or January, those recertification dates should have been pushed back about a year. But you could be required to recertify in February or March or future months in 2025. Just realize that, if you're in SAVE right now and you're pursuing PSLF, it's probably going to take you a little bit longer to get your qualifying payment credit. And then continue to file the PSLF certification forms. So there's no moratorium on that. Again, these forms verify that you've met the employment requirements for PSLF, and you have to have one form on file for at least one on file for every employer that you've had since October 1st of 2007, or whenever your loans were dispersed, if they were dispersed after that date. These forms should be filed annually or whenever you change jobs. And we want to emphasize that the most efficient way to do this right now is by using the PSLF help tool, which can be found on your federal student aid account, and requesting an electronic signature from your employer. Anything that's being filed with a manual signature right now is sitting in a pile and is taking very, very long to process. My experience is with the forms that are filed through the help tool, using an electronic signature from the employer, they're being processed really quickly, sometimes in a matter of days or weeks. So that's my advice. Reach out to LSLI if you have questions about how to do that. And again, starting in July of 2024, the management of the PSLF qualifying payment count was moved from MOHELA to the Department of Education. So since that transition, this is the best way to file those forms. Quick word about the IDR account adjustment. The IDR account adjustment was a one-time account revision that awarded retroactive credit towards income-driven repayment forgiveness, which could also be turned into public service loan forgiveness based on a set of relaxed rules. So you were awarded credit even if you hadn't made payments, as long as you were in repayment, or even if you were in long periods of forbearance or deferment, even if you weren't in an income-driven repayment plan. This is all retroactive. So if you have direct loans or FFEL loans that are held by the Department of Education, the benefits in that program are being applied to your account automatically. In fact, the credit, our understanding is the credit has been applied, that this process has been completed, and the tracker is actually now available from your studentaid.gov account. But the deadline for consolidating non-qualifying loans like commercially held FFELP loans or Perkins loans or HEAL loans passed. That was June 30th of 2024. So if you still have these non-qualifying loans, you can still consolidate them and gain access to things like PSLF and other income-driven repayment plans, but you won't get the retroactive credit that was afforded to under the IDR account adjustment. And then in terms of the trackers, both PSLF and now IDR forgiveness trackers are available on your federal student aid account. Through the dashboard, you can see the one right under the name dashboard. That's the public service loan forgiveness tracker. You would just click on more loans click on view details in order to get more information on a loan by loan basis. And then just added literally like within the last week is the IDR forgiveness tracker. And that's this box here down at the bottom where it says IDR end payment term. This is the summary. It tells you how many remaining payments you have in months and in years. You can click on view IDR progress for more details on the individual loans. It will actually give you a month-by-month breakdown of payments that are eligible and payments that are not eligible. And then finally, getting out of default, as you may have been aware, the department, and I'm sure I'm like running over here. Oh, not too bad. The Department of Education had implemented something called the Fresh Start Initiative. Fresh Start allowed the vast majority of defaulted federal student loan borrowers to get out of default without and repair any damage to their credit in the process. That initiative is over. And as far as we can tell, there are still about 5.5 million borrowers who are in default. So if you're in default, there are still two options for curing that default. You can use rehabilitation, which allows you to make 9 monthly payments over a 10-month period, would bring your loans out of default that way. It's a long process. It can take up to a year to complete that process. And it depends on whether you're eligible for that. If you've already done a rehabilitation on one of your loans, you can't do another one. And the other option is consolidation, which replaces old defaulted loans with new loans in good standing. There's no credit repair in this circumstance, but it does generally take about 2 to 3 months to complete at no cost if the applications are filed online. So a consolidation is generally easier to complete than a rehabilitation if you're eligible for it. But if you are on default, you want to reach out for some advice before you proceed with either one of these things. Okay, and that's a lot of information that I've given you. Up to date information as far as we know. So I'm going to turn it over again to Vivian to see if there are any other questions that we need to address.
Yes, there are a few questions that I was saving for you rather than answering in the chat.
Okay.
One is, what should people do if they think they may have more months of credit on their PSLF tracker than they think they ultimately are eligible for? And I'll make it a two-part question. And that is in particular, if you got PSLF credit for months, the most recent months in the SAVE plan.
Are we asking whether or not they actually have they think that they have more qualifying payments or eligible payments?
Well, if the tracker is reflecting that the most recent months in the SAVE plan are qualifying payments.
I mean, I wouldn't complain. I wouldn't bring it to anybody's attention. Now, just as an insurance policy, unless you were planning on quitting work, you could continue to file your employment certification forms for a few extra months, assuming you're out of the SAVE plan. I mean, first of all, I'd be very interested if somebody is getting credit for months in the SAVE forbearance. It would be great if you can reach out to one of the people at LSLI. We'd like to, obviously this is not something that we are going to report to anybody, but it would be interesting to know that that's something that's actually happening, because I have not seen that happen yet. I've not seen anybody actually being issued credit during the SAVE forbearance for PSLF. If you're getting that credit, I mean, you can apply for PSLF when you've hit 120 qualifying payments. If they forgive your debt, they've forgiven your debt. If you continue to work, you can still file the employment certification forms, I suppose. Although you wouldn't have any debt to file them on. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you're worried about it, you might want to get out of the SAVE forbearance, work some additional months accumulating credit in some additional plans, and then file for PSLF. So you would file with more than 120 qualifying payment credits, and that would make up for anything that might get clawed back if somebody realized that there was a mistake. But I haven't seen that yet. So
I would also suggest that anyone who just happens to really like what their payment count is now, to make sure that they're taking screenshots, printing out the status, so that they can go back and try to preserve any months that ultimately get clawed back later.
yeah, absolutely.
Next, there's a question about whether the IRS is still providing information automatically to student aid if people have given authorization for that.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, that feature is still shut down. It's still not working. That doesn't mean that it won't work at some point. But certainly, in like Vivian or Courtney, you can correct me if you've seen it. In the applications that I've filed or helped people file in the past couple of weeks, it's still requiring that everybody upload proof of income, like copies of tax returns or pay stubs. So it's still it still allows you to approve that automatic access to the IRS database retrieval, but it's not actually working on the applications right now.
And next, there's a question about the PSLF buyback and how to audit your months of credit to figure out which months you would need to attempt to buy back.
Well, so that that's where you would want to look at the tracker, the PSLF tracker, and filter it on ineligible months. And the months that are ineligible, it should tell you what the reason it was for being ineligible. Usually it's because you were in some kind of a deferment or forbearance that doesn't qualify. And then of course, anybody that's eligible to do the buyback right now, you're going to be very close to PSLF, meaning that probably most of those months are going to be in the save forbearance if that's what you were in. And that's the number of months that you would look at your actual qualifying payment count. And then the number you would look at the months that are eligible, which you add the months that are eligible to what's already qualifying and come up with a number. And let's say you're 3 months short, that's the number of months that you would be looking to buy back. And again, this is all, the buyback is very new. So you can reach out for some guidance if you need a counselor to kind of help you go through it. And yeah, Vivian, I also just wanted to kind of go back to that original question about the extra PSLF payments. I want to make sure that people understand the distinction between eligible payments and qualifying payments, because you can see both on your tracker. An eligible payment is an eligible month is a month that meets all the requirements. So you would have had the right loan requirements, but it's just awaiting an updated employment certification form. Qualifying payments are payments that have already been deemed are going to count towards your PSLF. So those are the ones that they've reviewed and they've determined that you have this number of qualifying payment credits towards PSLF. So a lot of people have a lot of eligible credit for PSLF, but not all of that will actually be able to be turned into qualifying payments because they're maybe they didn't work, they didn't have the employment requirements during those periods. So I just want to make sure that people understand the distinction. Anything else? Vivian?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. I'm looking at some new questions that came in.
Oh.
So there's a question about getting historical credit for PSLF that might not have been certified previously. And yes, you can always go back to previous employers to request those certifications. It just gets a little bit more complicated if you don't have that contact information anymore. So we always advise people to keep their employment certification as current as possible. And there's no fee for any of our services.
Correct. Yes.
I'm just looking at the next one. Right, so sometimes the information on the tracker can be a little bit daunting for people. If you're concerned that the information isn't correct, then again, you can come to us to request assistance to confirm that the information is correct and that you're not entitled to any other credit. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you so much, Nancy.
Yes, thank you,
Okay.
Nancy.
Well, thank you all for joining us. I know it was a lot of information, but we look forward to hearing from you if you need help.
And if anyone wants to email me any questions, feel free. You should all have my email, but I also put it in the chat. And I can pass it along to Vivian and Courtney. And next, we are in the process of planning our next presentation, which will probably be in March, which will be on labor law. So wage and hour violations. So if you're not already signed up for our legal lessons, definitely visit our website and sign up for our legal lessons. That way you get notifications of when all of our presentations are. So thanks so much, Nancy.
Thank you, everyone. Stay warm.
Have a great Wednesday.
Bye.